You're in for a treat as you absorb Susan J. Ryan's poignant suggestions and master delivery of her caregiving role. Susan is author of Our Journey of Love: 5 Steps to Navigate Your Caregiving Journey. She has been in multiple care support roles for 30 years as a daughter, wife, granddaughter, friend, and advocate. Living that roller coaster of emotions from exhaustion to finding balance, she experienced firsthand the breadth and depth of the caregiver role. In this episode of Pause for Purpose, Susan shares how to provide a positive journey for the person in your care, and valuable messages for the broader caregiving community.
It's time to introduce Sue Ryan, which is a real honor. Say hi, Sue, to everyone. Real honor.
Hi, everyone.
To be able to do so. And before I even get into what she's, her description of who she is, I just got an email yesterday from Sue. Her book, which is 5 Steps to Navigate Your Caregiving Journey, has been selected to be the feature book in ALZ, A-L-Z-S, ALZ Authors. And so she is featured just 100% in this article that's all about her life and her journey with helping her husband and herself cope with and, what do I want to say, deal with this dreadful disease called Alzheimer's with such positive energy and positive direction. So for more than 30 years, Sue has had a variety of roles of care support as a daughter, a wife, a granddaughter, friend, and advocate. During her first year as a caregiver, she was exhausted, frustrated, confused, fearful, and very disappointed. She kept feeling that she should be able to do more and better. She was passionate about everyone feeling their best and having their greatest experiences, so why couldn't I do better how I was helping my loved one? She began searching for answers and learning from others like me and perhaps like you, who began our journeys to create the best experiences our care receiver while struggling without answers. And she just sat down one day and typed and wrote and rewrote and came up with this really very successful book. So congratulations, Sue. Welcome, Sue. And take it away and let's hear your story and share your slides, and then we'll open it up for questions as we always do.
Very good. Let's see the. Let me just double check with everyone. Can you all see the slide?
Yep.
Yep. Very good.
Yes.
Picture yourself at the age of 15. You're on the trip of a lifetime. You're with your parents. You're in Florence, Italy. It's the end of a very long day. And yet you know that you're at the pinnacle of the day. Since early in the morning, right as the doors opened, you've been in museum after museum, looking at painting after painting and sculpture after sculpture. As you went from museum to museum, you stopped into a basilica to look at more sculptures, frescoes, and objects to art. You had the most amazing tour guide who showed you each of these pieces of artwork through their lens as that of an artist, teaching you how to see it in a way that you didn't if you're not an artist. That was me. It was an amazing time. The tour guide was my mom, and the trip of a lifetime was a trip that my dad had surprised her with as she decided to step back into earning her degree in art history that she had stepped away from when they decided to raise my brother and me. I got to go along, and you would think as a 15-year-old, taking an entire day going through the museums might be exhausting. There we go. Now am I okay now?
Yeah,
I
you're
got
fine.
muted there for a moment. Okay.
Yeah. Just everybody else, mute yourself if you're not speaking, or when you're not speaking, just for distraction's sake. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I was so incredibly energized at the end of the day because my mom would give us little tidbits of what was coming all through the day, pointing out things for us to look at and sharing with us about this. As we got to this statue, and it's a statue in a museum, it's just another statue. And yet, no, it really wasn't. As we stood in front of this statue, and I looked up at this statue that was nearly 17 feet tall, I got goosebumps all over, and I was just in awe. I was standing in front of Michelangelo's The David. Have any of you seen The David?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's spectacular, isn't it? They say it's arguably the most famous sculpture in the world, whatever. But it was spectacular. And my mom, as an artist who had been studying all the paintings that we'd seen and all the sculptures that we'd seen, had also studied Michelangelo's The David. And as she began to show it to us, at the age of 15, it was an incredibly profound experience. And yet the reason I'm sharing it with you today is that later in my life, I realized how closely it was tied to my purpose. And here's why. As Mom showed us the statue, she explained it to us, and she started reading this quote by Michelangelo. Every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. Michelangelo, when he started the sculpture at the age of 26, sought out a stone that would be the right stone to create the David. And he found a piece of stone that had been lying rejected for more than 25 years. Two other artisans had started to work with it, and they said, no, it had too many imperfections. They weren't going to use it. And yet when Michelangelo saw it, it was perfect. And what my mom explained is that a true artist, when they see the block of stone, it's not just a block of stone. They see within it what's meant to be coming out of it. So when Michelangelo saw that stone, he saw the David. Every block of stone has a statue inside it. What I came to understand later in my life, as I realized how important my purpose was and how I had come into this world complete with a purpose that was to be revealed to me when I had access to it throughout my life. I realized that every block of stone, we're each a block of stone. And no matter where we are in the world and what we look like, we're this beautiful, perfect block of stone. And my mom also explained that the sculptor doesn't carve into the stone what's meant to be. What the sculptor does is chisel away those things that don't fit. And so the beauty of the perfection of what's inside is what shines. And so as I began to be more tied to my purpose, what I realized is that the sculptor who's discovering it is our purpose. It's my purpose who's chiseling away the things that don't fit. So the beauty of the perfection of who I was brought in the world to be is able to be expressed. My purpose knows that, and through my life, it's helping me to reveal it. I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. My purpose sees the beauty of who I am. Our purposes see the beauty of who we are in our lives, in these pieces of stone, who we are when we come into the world, and they continue to chip away at anything that doesn't fit. So as we move through our lives, we step more fully into our purpose and our meant to be. When I talk about in my life, my purpose, I began to realize that through my life, I was always living in my purpose. And yet periodically I would get a nudge to say, this is going to be your future purpose. Stay where you are now. This is going to be your future purpose. And so from that point, there would be times when I would be in my current purpose. And I've learned now to listen to the nudge, to when it's guiding me that it's going to be time for me to step into my next future purpose. And what I've also learned is that every single time it's time for me to listen to the nudge and step into my future purpose, I'm also invited to consideration of the path that my purpose wants me to go on. I don't need to know the path clearly. I just need to be open to it. So in our time this afternoon, I have 3 wishes for you. One is that if you aren't already doing it, you learn to embrace the nudge of your future purpose and the beauty of where it's going to guide you to further reveal who you are and the gifts you bring into the world. And that as you embrace your purpose, it continues to open the door of possibility that continue to reveal who you are, even if you don't know what they are. And we don't need to always know, and it's okay, because our purpose is going to help guide us and support us on the way. And that as we step into that, our purpose knows we don't need to know, we just go. As Vicki mentioned, last year, I wrote a book on caregiving called 5 Steps to Navigate Your Caregiving Journey. I'm incredibly humbled by the fact that it became an international bestseller. And what that means to me is not how many books I sold, but the whole purpose of writing this was the lives that I could touch. And I feel very blessed that it's touched lives. While I'm not going to talk through the details of the book today, when we get to the end, any questions you may have on caregiving, any questions you may have on any of these steps, anything that I can do to talk with you about caregiving and give you insights, I'm glad to do. My contact information is also there. And if we don't have time today, please don't hesitate to reach out. The purpose of my using the book today is that it was such a powerful part of my life as I lived in my current purpose and listened to the nudge of my future purpose and how transformational that has been in my life. How many of you have ever kind of felt a nudge, like, hey, you may want to go, is the garage door shut? Or, hey, you should call this person, should have this thing checked out. You ever felt kind of a little nudge? Well, if you're like me, I would get the little nudge and it would just go flit right by because I'm busy. I got things to do. And so often later on, I'd go, oh, why did I ignore that? I should have called that person. I should have done that. And as I've stepped farther along my spiritual journey, I've realized that the value to me in slowing down and listening to the nudge. And because of that, the gift in return is the nudge becomes more clear to me and I get the messages more strongly. And so one day I got this very clear message, clear nudge. It said, Sue, you have a perspective on caregiving that most people don't have access to. You are meant to write a book and to speak and to share the lessons you've learned in the last 30 years in your roles of caregiving. I said, okay, I'm good with that, but here's the deal. I've never actually written a book. So I'm fine with writing a book, but if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do it together. So what I would do every evening is I would make sure my computer was charged up. I would put it over on the side of the bed on my little lap tray. I would say my prayers and ask for a download. I would go to sleep. I really should have asked for the download to come at a different time, but I didn't specify the time. And every single morning around 3:30, I would awaken with a download. I would sit straight up, put my computer there, and I would write. And the power of this being so connected into my purpose is that I could feel the urgency. It was more like I was a channel for the words to be written. I didn't edit anything. I just typed and typed and typed and typed and typed until there was nothing more to type for that day. And the other part of it as I was typing is I could see the people whose lives I was meant to touch. I could feel the exhaustion of the caregiver who kept shaving away parts of their life to give more to their care receiver. And they were so exhausted because they just didn't have anything left to shave off of their life, and yet there was more that was needed. I could feel the weight of overwhelm of the person who had tried so many different things and they just didn't work. And because they were so overwhelmed, they couldn't think clearly. They didn't know what to do. And for each one of those, I kept going, yes, I have something I can share with them. I am meant to share this. And I was so connected with it. And I knew it was what I was meant to do. And as I was writing one of these stories, I received the nudge for my next future purpose. I don't know if any of you have studied the Nautilus. I'm big on metaphors. And the Nautilus has been a metaphor for me in many areas of my life, one of which is I've studied the Fibonacci, and you can see the beautiful angles here. And But the power of the nautilus as it relates to purpose was something that actually came to me while I was studying the Fibonacci sequence, and we won't talk about that part today. But I learned about the nautilus, and it comes into the world with a few of these beautiful little chambers. And that as it grows, it outgrows the chamber that it's in. And so the next chamber is being built from the chamber that was there before, and it's larger. The nautilus doesn't know exactly what it's going to be like, but the nautilus moves forward into it, because as it moves forward, the chamber behind it is going to close. And it doesn't just close and become irrelevant. The chamber behind it closes and becomes a vital part of it living the rest of its life, because the gases in it allow it to stay buoyant. And I connected that one day with my purpose, is that my purpose had come into the world with me. And yet as it was meant to be revealed, each time it was revealed and I lived in that, when it was ready for the next part to be revealed, the foundation of it stayed the same. My purpose hasn't ultimately changed. I've just been able to step more fully into it and reveal it in ways that I wouldn't have known as a child. And so just like the nautilus keeps moving forward without knowing where it's going, but feeling safe to step away from what it had known, that's what I realized about my purpose. And I stayed very open to that. And here's the story that I was writing in the book when this happened. This is a story that was not one of my finer moments, not one of my finer hours. And yet it was really, really profound. And it's literally transformed my life. When I was growing up, one of the things my daddy did so much of was teach me how to stay safe. He'd teach me how to think, do this, be very careful in these areas. And so I was always very cautious of that. He was in the 5th year of his 8-year journey with a type of dementia. And I was watching him, and we were at the home of he and my mother-in-law, and it was time that he wanted to walk the dog. So he went out the back door, and their home slanted down in the backyard, and it was on this grass. Mark, you probably know about this in South Florida, called St. Augustine grass. I call it glass because it's sharp. And it's an irregular surface. It was dusk. It wasn't really great to see. My dad's got the dog. I'm thinking of all the lessons my dad taught me about safety. And I'm concerned that my dad's not going to be safe. So I'm saying, Daddy, listen, let's not walk down that way. Let's come over here. There's a concrete sidewalk. Let's just walk over here. Well, my dad's getting agitated because he's going to walk the dog. And I'm getting agitated because I'm fearful for his safety. I'm looking back at the past of what we taught me about it. I'm thinking about the future. What if he falls and he gets hurt and I have to take him to the hospital, or God forbid he breaks his hip or something like that. Because of all that, I'm not really staying present to Daddy, and he's getting more and more agitated. And we finally make it down the hill, and we get the dog walked, and we finally make it back up the hill. And yet my dad was so filled with anxiety. And I was filled with frustration, anxiety, fear, all of those emotions. Because I had been underserving this experience and so fearful for my dad. And yet in the middle of that experience, and this may sound a little woo-woo, but it's not. I think it happens to all of us. It was just so profound in this moment. I felt like part of me just moved up above the experience, and I was observing it like a disinterested third party, observing it to harness the lessons, not from a place of emotion, but of what I could learn from it. When I went home that night and I sat down, what came to me was that while I had accepted that my daddy had dementia, I had not massively accepted it. I needed to massively accept every single part of the fact that he had a type of dementia, which means that he did not have access to remembering what you do to stay safe. And because I hadn't massively accepted all of it and could just accept it and stay very balanced with what it was, that this is just the way it is, I couldn't stay radically present. There's one thing about, yes, we're in the moment, we're present, but I mean radically present, so that all of my energy and attention could be focused on what my dad had access to and what he was going through. So that from, again, a place of calm and balance, I could observe the situation and I could make wise choices, and I could figure out what to do that would maximize his experience. And as I was writing about that experience, I heard the nudge, and it said, keep doing what you're doing. This is your future purpose. What I then came to realize, and it was, I had written the book, I'd gone through all of that. I was working with one of my leadership coachees, and a situation he was going through, the example that would help him perfectly was this story of massive acceptance and radical presence. I had been living with that, and this is the way that I am through my caregiving experiences now. No matter what the situation, I stay calm and balanced because I've massively accepted this is what it is. And I stay radically present in the moment. And when we get done, if we've got some time, I can tell you how that served me very well as my husband went through his diagnosis of COVID-19 a few months ago. But more important to this, to what we're talking about now, is that in the moment when I realized that this coachee over on a different side of my life could benefit from this, that my future purpose was that I quit keeping the different aspects of my life separate. And that was the way I had grown up. I don't know if any of you learned that way, but I learned in business, you didn't bring in your personal life. We didn't talk about our health with other people. We kept everything separate. And so I literally had taken it to the degree that I had 2 websites, one for my business and leadership coaching and speaking, and one for the things I did in the area of caregiving. I had them completely separated, and I didn't have any references to the other ones on there. And what my future purpose was guiding me to be is to say, you need to be authentically you, and all of you, and every experience you have and everything that's part of your life needs to come together, because the stories that you have and the experience you have that you've gained in business is going to help people who are in roles of caregiving and need to understand things that can help them. And you have reference points from your business. And the people who are in other areas of your life, learning things like massive acceptance and radical presence will serve them. And that became my future purpose. And that's what I've now stepped into in the rest of my life. This was the other really powerful thing that had been there all along, and I didn't recognize it as my purpose kept transitioning over the course of my life. And it was in this transition into my future purpose where I began to see that all along my purpose that had been chipping away at the things that didn't fit had also been supporting me and guiding me. And as it gave me the path to walk down, it was there for me. But it was so much stronger this time. And here's some of the examples of how my purpose has given me the guideposts and the guardrails to step without clarity into my future purpose so it could become my current purpose. The first one I did speak about, it's the nudge. The nudge has become so much clearer. The nudge was always there, and the nudge is always right on point with my purpose. And the nudge knows what I have capacity for. The nudge knows that when I was much younger, this would not have been something I could have stepped into. But it knows that now I can, and now this is where I'm meant to go. And the guardrails that it's providing me, the chiseling away that it's doing at the stone that doesn't fit, is it's having me evaluate my belief system and say, those limiting beliefs you've got, those don't serve you anymore. Where you're going, those don't fit. We're just going to get rid of those. And the belief systems that you have that strengthen you, those, it's time for them to come and shine more brightly because you can use them and they're of more value. And the next guardrail that was huge for me is permission to be me. It's so much of my life. I kept trying, as the bottom little point says, perfection. I kept trying to be perfect. I thought I needed to be perfect. I thought I needed to do everything right. I thought I needed to be just what everybody said their expectations of me were, what I should be able to do, or I could be good at, or all of those things. And my purpose said, that's not going to work anymore. I'm going to give you the guideposts of you stepping into who you're really meant to be. And if you ever get off kind of a little bit at the side, no, I'm going to push you back. And there were times when I started to be moving forward in my brand, and it would be as though I hit a wall. I could not see. I didn't know what it was. I could see so clearly for other people, and I couldn't see in myself. And then I realized I wasn't being authentically me. I was being the expectation I perceived someone else had of me. And so as I've stepped into my purpose in this reveal of it, my purpose is guiding me so much more clearly with the guideposts and guardrails to keep me online. One of the other ones is labels. I'll mention this just very, very briefly. It's a big, long conversation for another time. But one of the things that is so prevalent in the caregiving community is people will pick up on a word and they will use it, and it's a label. For example, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry. Now, some of you may use the word I'm sorry in your life, but is that really the right word for the right emotion? And what I learned for me is that when I was using the word, I feel guilty, like I feel guilty if I'm going to lunch and my husband can't, or I'm so sorry for it. And it's not the right emotion and it's not the right definition. That I needed to go back for every word that I was using and make sure I had my own definition. And it worked for me, and it allowed me to step into the emotion that served me and served the person who I was with. And that's who I authentically am. And all of these are interconnected, but that was so huge for me. And while it came from the caregiving side, as I intersect it and integrate it in all of my life, I am more of me, and I'm a more valuable person for me and for everybody else. And finally, as our purpose continues to reveal itself, our mind welcomes new ideas. I've heard the saying, and I'm sure you have, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and we get stuck in our ways as we get older. Not so when we're living from our purpose, because our purpose chisels away at the things that don't fit. And it says, that doesn't suit you. Oh no, I've got exciting things for you to do. Let me just reveal some more of you. And as that, you're going to be excited and you're going to want to learn. And I'm so unquenchably curious about things. And I keep seeking out new perspectives. And anytime that I have an emotional charge about something, where there might be some resistance, I lean into it and say, what is there for me to learn about myself? How can I become better because of that? And I love this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions. No, it doesn't. Just like the Nautilus, it doesn't. But the mind supports us and is there for us as we continue to move forward. So here's my current purpose. And it feels so wonderful. You know, I don't know how many of you have written multiple purpose statements. I certainly have in my life, and this is not what my first one was. And yet it's along the same lines of what it was, just expressed in a way that I have more access to. Is that, oh my gracious, I want to positively touch our world every single day. And I do live with a heart of service. It just fills me so much. And I'm unquenchably curious to know what's there for me to learn and what's there for me to serve. I mentioned I'm big on metaphors, and here I've got the picture of the cocoon and the caterpillar and the butterfly. Many of you may have heard, and there are some pros and cons arguments that agree or disagree about that, but literally that the butterfly's wings, when they flap, can change the pattern of weather. And whether that's true or not, the beauty, the just magnificence of the butterfly's wings can only be when the butterfly is able to come out of the cocoon. And it's when they're in the cocoon and they have to struggle and struggle and struggle. And they know they need to struggle to get out of the cocoon. If they don't struggle, they can't fly. And if they fly, they can't do what they're meant to do. And what I came to realize as I was studying more about purpose is I feel like the cocoon is what's wrapping us in our lives. And that even though it knows that we're going to go through struggles, the struggles have a purpose that help us reveal ourselves more clearly to ourselves and to the world. And that if we don't have that struggle, we won't be able to be the beautiful people who were brought here to be. We won't be able to be the meant to be that we were brought in the world to be. And I also believe that that cocoon is purpose, and it's holding me firmly. It's supporting me the whole time I'm struggling, so that I know that when I get through the struggle and I come out, I'll be the butterfly who can make a positive impact in our world. So I hope that my wishes have come through today for you, that You learn, if you haven't already, how beautiful it is to embrace the nudge when it comes. And that when you continue to embrace your purpose, it opens doors of possibilities that continue to reveal who you are, even if they take you places you never could have imagined you'd be going. And that when you do and you step in the path of your future purpose, you don't need the clarity. You just need to know that your purpose is there surrounding you and supporting you. So whether you're going through a struggle, or whether you're flapping your beautiful wings, or whether you're the statue that your purpose has carved away everything that doesn't fit, that you're living and you're meant to be, you're living your best life, and you're making your most positive impact. Thank you.
Can I offer a comment, Joyce?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
You know, I really appreciate number 3, step into the path of your future purpose without the need for clarity. I think one of the things I find in working with caregivers that I work with as a volunteer, a lot of people put a lot of stress on themselves, feeling they have to have clarity. And I really appreciate the fact that you have endorsed the idea that you can enjoy the process and be mindful, being in the moment now, and not let that self-imposed demand to find immediate clarity is really important. I think that's such a critical thing that you pointed out. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. One of the greatest gifts of staying radically present and massively accepting what's going on, I'll give you a quick example. Before COVID-19, when we were still able to go into the memory care unit, frequently they bring music in, and the residents love the music. And there are different residents with different access to modalities. And one of our residents had very little access to movement in any part of her body and any kind of expression. And a musician had come in one day who was playing this great music, and everybody was enjoying it and dancing. And this resident's name was Eleanor. And I looked over, and Eleanor's foot was just moving, just infinitesimally. And those of us who were there celebrated so excitedly that rather than the fact that she didn't have access to any more movement than that the music was touching her, and she did have access to that little teeny tiny movement. And by being able to just massively accept that this is what's happening in our lives and see the beauty in the moment, it made it such an amazing, wonderful experience for everyone.
I would like to speak about clarity a little bit, a comment. So many of my friends who have retired or about to retire have asked me, how do you make it work? How do you become comfortable with doing something that you've never done before? And the questions and the discussion goes down a path of they're trying to define every element of what they might try to do. They're trying to develop a box, define the 4 corners of that box, and having that box is what they need to feel comfortable stepping into something, trying something new. And as a result, they never step in. They never try something new because they can't let go of the need to have clarity on what they're going to do. And I think your point's a very valid one. Clarity sometimes, I think, gets in the way of, as you call it, chipping away at the veneer that hides whoever you are within there. But I agree with that comment completely about the need to drop clarity, drop the need for clarity, and just go for it. Sometimes see what happens, see what develops.
Thank you. Yes, what I've learned for me in my life is as long as I have gotten clarity on the things that bring me joy or make me feel good or that I'm curious about, if I focus on those things which are taking me towards something, then I don't have to have clarity about where I'm going to get, but I know that they're taking me on the right path. And I remember when my dad was stepping into retirement. For many years, we lived on a ranch, we had horses, and that was a big part of his hobby. And my mom was concerned that he wouldn't know what to do. And people, he said so many people that he knew would, like June 30th, they were going to quit working. But they hadn't thought about their life after their work. They hadn't thought about what they were passionate about or what they wanted to do. They'd put so much of their time in their life. And my dad said, he said, what I want when I retire is, he said, I want to wake up one day and work gets in the way of the things I'm most passionate about. And that's what he did. And so you're not stopping something, you're allowing yourself to more fully step into something that really fills your life in a different place in your life. And I think there's some people who don't step into that, or they don't seek that out. They look for something external as opposed to what really touches them inside and what they can move toward and make a difference in their lives and the lives of others.
Sue?
Well, unfortunately, with some of the individuals, and you mentioned retirement, some of the individuals that would love to retire, they think they've worked long enough, they're whatever age, 60, 65, 70, and they want to retire. But they are very uncomfortable with the concept of retiring and then experiencing life and see what gets presented to them. If they would, again, going back to the box and the clarity, if they could just drop the need to have that future portion of life so tightly defined, take the time, experience things, see what gets presented, and the path will be there. The purpose will be there. The enjoyment will be there, but you have to sort of let go of things to be able to find.
You're exactly right. Yep.
Sue?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there, when you use the word nudge,
Yes, ma'am.
is nudge and synchronicity, are they different? Are they the same? What is synchronicity compared to a nudge?
I don't really think it's, well, I don't want to, going on what labels are, I don't know how you define synchronicity, so I don't want to answer that without understanding what your definition of synchronicity is.
Being at a place where someone sits next to you, or you meet someone in a ladies' room or on a train, and you have a conversation and you go, wow, that was really inspiring. That was a really great idea.
That's a nudge.
Pardon me? So it really is kind of the nudge.
It's anything that has you say, oh, okay, I'm going to consider that. It's when your mind is open into something different. And for example, with what I was talking about in the massive acceptance and radical presence, I hadn't thought at all about shifting my life based on that. I realized the beauty of what it gave me and the clarity in the moment, but it wasn't until when I was doing that the nudge was, this is going to be your future purpose. And I began to be open to the possibilities of where that would take it. But sometimes my nudge has been sitting next to somebody, like you said, on an airplane or something, and they make a comment, or I'm listening to a podcast and somebody says something and it's like, wow. So it's any different kind of thing. It's an awareness. I mean, the nudge to write the book was just more of an awareness that came to me. I mean, it was literally like, you're meant to do this.
I have often felt those nudges too, and I think of them as sort of a gentle thought, rather than something really sharp and defined, but it's kind of that gentle thought. And if you open up, and I love your writing style and how you write. I'm kind of the same way. I'm always fascinated how after a paragraph or two, a chapter begins to write itself. And that's where I think this whole idea, I think we are channeling something, whether it's from the Akashic or whatever. I agree with you. I think that's a lot of fun. And you've got a great book, by the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Sue, why don't you talk a little bit about your husband and the journey you two have been on, particularly with COVID and Alzheimer's and steps that he's made and ability to get up and
Okay.
the joy that's brought.
When my husband's name is Jack. When he was diagnosed, I turned to him and I said, honey, we're beginning a new chapter in our journey of love. I had learned about massive acceptance, and I had learned about staying radically present. And so what I've been able to do from the very first moment when he was diagnosed is to stay very open and see the positive. And even in a really, really challenging situation, and there have been a number of those, I've been able to stay open and positive and see what the potential of it is. For example, I don't use the labels of what a horrible, dreadful disease it is. My husband has a disease and it takes away his access to his memories. And yet I look at him as the person who he is right now, and I deal with him where he's at. So I don't project, where he's at or all of those things. What I do is I stay present to the things that are going on. And so as we navigated down the journey, there were times when something would happen. For example, one day, he'd never done this before, but we would do some centering prayer in the afternoon, and I actually kind of fell asleep. And he got up and left the condo and walked out, which he'd never done before. And I realized, okay, now it's time for us to put some other mechanisms on the doors to protect him. As he's moved into memory care, what I realized is that, okay, now for me, I'm no longer his primary caregiver for all the areas of the responsibility. And I talk about that in the book, that part of massive acceptance of that is also massive acceptance for me, is that as a caregiver, there are certain things that I'm capable of doing. But on the day that he was diagnosed and became an Alzheimer's patient, having this diagnosis of the disease, I became a caregiver. And that word as a label, it's like, okay, all of a sudden you're supposed to be good at everything. Well, I'm not. And part of what I had learned from my business journey that I brought into this is that you look at yourself, you look at what you're qualified for, and you look at the areas where you can be responsible, and then you look at the areas where you're not the best qualified to do the things that need to be done, and you find the people, and you get your ego out of the way. And so part of what has helped me as I've navigated transferring him into a memory care unit was, what are the things that are going to make it easiest for him to adjust to this? I took him to day programs there for about 4 or 5 months, so he was familiar with everything, so that when he transitioned, it was not as big a deal. I've gotten to know all the leadership team at the care facility where he's at. So we've had communications, we understand how to work together. So I can learn the things that I can do to help them, because my goal is that he's as good a resident as he can be, and that they're as good at caregiving as they can possibly be. And so again, from a balanced perspective, when they're talking about the things that go on, I look at it from that perspective. It was a bit early in March when we were asked to leave the care facility because of COVID-19. And the facility did a really good job of keeping it out of there, but obviously one person must have come in, because on July 17th at 2 p.m., my husband was fine. Later in the afternoon, he sat down and he wouldn't get up, and they put him in a wheelchair. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, he had a temperature, and they took him to the hospital, and he was diagnosed with COVID-19. And he was then in a hospital bed for a month. And so I had no access to the hospital or the doctors or anything like that. And what I did is utilizing the things that I had learned. I said, what do I have control over? What are the primary things that he needs? What are the things that I can be doing to try to support them, giving him the best care they can? And then how can I help support them? And so I put things into place that would help me. I didn't know how he was doing I didn't need to know how he was doing every few minutes. I didn't need to have the emotion or overwhelm or anything about that, because he was either going to get better or he wasn't. And so the things that I could control were the things that I focused on. And as they were navigating, trying to bring the patients out, there were several of the other residents passed away. He was able to come home for the hospital, but we had to put some other measures in place. So it was figuring out how to put those in place. And the entire time, my goal was kind of like 360. is how do each of us who have a touch point with him, what are we going to be able to do the best job caring for him and what he needs? And then how do I help each one of those people the most that I can in the ways that I can to support them? Silly little things I did that I've learned meant so much to them. From the day that he moved in, or that we stepped away from being able to go into the care facility, they have the website of the care facility he's at. You can send notes. So the different teams, I've written notes every single day to whether it's environmental services, the concierge team, the medical team, the leadership team, the activities team. I keep writing them notes, security team. I take treats to them. When he moved into the hospital, I did the same thing as I got messages to the care team, how much I appreciated them and how grateful I was for his care and support. I knew they were doing their best to do their job, and all I wanted to do was to do the parts that I could control. And so as I'm navigating all of this, it's on the one level, yes, he has a very, very serious disease. One of the byproducts of that is that as the time has gone on, I only get to see him for about 15 minutes a week on a little video chat. And so he has no memory of me now. But we have a nice conversation, but he has no idea who I am. He doesn't recognize any part of me anymore. And so I completely, again, I massively accept that. That would not have been his choice. And we have nice conversations. And so his heart is still there. And if I didn't have the perspective I had, and if I hadn't practiced that perspective and had it be so congruent with who I am, and if I hadn't looked at it through the lens of my purpose, I wouldn't be able to live so comfortably through that. But I am. And every day I see the beauty and the opportunities that he has and in the experience that he has. He enjoys the food he's eating. We get things a little bit simpler all the time. He enjoys his meals. He enjoys the music. And those are the things that I can help control. And that's the way I live.
It's really great. You know, so it's interesting, as you were speaking, a monarch just flew past my window, landed on a rose bush for a brief moment and flapped its wings and took off. So
There are no accidents.
there are no accidents. Does anyone, Joyce, can you eliminate screen share so we can bring everyone together here?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you cope with the anger that comes along with the dementia? And I'm dealing with an elderly aunt. I am the only living relative at this point. And she is becoming at times very sarcastic, very angry. She knows who I am very well. She's in a senior community, does not always remember that. She's confused, but she gets so angry, and I know it's not her talking, and I just remind myself of that, but I don't know how to respond when she's making these comments about things. She hates where she is, and then she likes where she is. She wants to leave, but she has no place to go. And the script is every time that the script is the same. And it's like, do I try to help her see some of the joyful things? Do I just change the subject? Do I ignore it? I realize sometimes she sounds so logical, and then she'll ask me the same question 3 times, and I go, okay, she is not rational and she is not logical.
Yeah.
Any tips that you have for dealing with that?
I do have some. Yes, I do have some. So again, thinking about the concept of massive acceptance and radical presence. The massive acceptance is that if she seems rational, you don't go, oh, she can still be rational. You don't go back to that. You massively accept the fact that she has a disease that as it progresses, it allows her to have moments of clarity and to be rational, but there are other moments when it doesn't. And so for you, it is not, there are several pieces of this. It's that when she's rational, you can have a rational conversation with her, but don't assume that she's being rational. It just happens to be what she's saying. The number one thing is don't take any of it personally. We are so taught from our emotional perspective that when somebody's angry, that either we've done something wrong or we need to fix it. And when it comes to dementia, when they're angry, it's not something we have capacity to fix. It's not something they have capacity to fix. The thing that tends to work the most with that is something kind of what we'll call deflection. That, for example, what might be something that you would have been having a conversation with her about where she was angry? What might have been something she was talking about?
Well, she'll comment on the fact she's not allowed to have visitors, and she'll say, "What are you doing?" And I'll say, I keep it in the, well, you know, I'm staying home just like you are. I'm sheltering in place, being safe. Oh, but you have somebody there with you, and that makes all the difference. I don't have that. I'm alone. I'm looking at empty chairs, and I'm alone, and I'm miserable, and I want to die. And I just say, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you know, you're important to me, and I care. And I want you to be safe. I just want to die. I want to get this thing and get it over with.
And so part of one of the things that you can do is, you know, when she says, I just want to die. And I might say, you know, based on what you're saying, I can understand why you might feel that way. I understand what it might be like to be alone. Do you remember when you had visitors? Who was one of your favorite visitors? Who was somebody who visited with you, who you enjoyed the most? And so you begin the conversation by agreeing with them and kind of going down the path, no matter what the conversation is, kind of agree with them and talk with them a little bit about it, and then pick up on something. And so, you know, you talked about visitors. Oh, visitors can be so wonderful. When you did have visitors, who were some of your favorite visitors? What were some of the things that you did that you enjoyed the most? And keep following on that path and keep picking up little breadcrumbs of what they talk about. And it's just trying to allow them to move their own mind to something else. That you can't move their mind, and you can't change their mood. You can't fix it, and they can't either. All you can do is to help them. Now, one of the things I learned, this was fortunately not an example that it was my personal one, but I learned about it during going to some Alzheimer's support meetings. There was a couple who had a home in Florida, and they also had a home that had been their primary home up north. And this woman said, one day her husband said, I want to go home. And he just kept saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. Well, she thought he wanted to go home. So she packs everything up. They get in the car. They drive home. They get up north. Now picture how long it's taken and all that. They get up north. He's there and he goes, I want to go home. She's like, well, we are home. No, I want to go home. In our rational mind, what we think is home is a physical place, like this is our home. But that's not necessarily what they think. What he wanted was to feel safe. So often what that is what does it represent to you? So when they use the words, they're losing the memory, the connection to what that word means in their lives. What they determined was that he didn't feel secure. He didn't feel comfortable. He wanted to feel the safety he used to feel. And so they focused on that. So when you're in a conversation with somebody, again, in your rational mind, you're responding to them based on the words they're saying because this is what it seems like it is. Ask them questions and gently have a conversation with them and see if you can figure out what they're really talking about. Does that help at all? Other questions?
I'm just sitting here thinking about, and this is really off the top of my head. I've been through Alzheimer's, but I'm thinking about the illustration of the statue of David, right? And that it reveals, when things are chipped away, it reveals our purpose, reveals who we are. And so when someone has Alzheimer's or there is some other illness that comes into a person's life that they don't have control over, I want to play with, so what is their purpose you know, what more is being chipped away in their life, making them that beautiful statue that they are, that is something we adapt to. The artistry of it, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with it. I haven't even thought about that until your presentation. And it just feels like there's something there.
I'd be glad to share how that has been in my life, both with my daddy and with my husband. And I'm not saying this is the way it would be with anyone else, but when I have conversations with Jack now, and over the last several years when we would have conversations, as his ability to complete a sentence or complete a thought diminished, I would pick up on a word he was saying. And I would support him and I would encourage him and I would talk about that word with him and I would allow him to go wherever he had access to. And I would see the joy on his face when he would connect with a thought. And I would realize, and if you want to use the analogy of the butterfly flapping its wings, that when we bring joy into the world and we share it, that it spreads. When he would smile and he had joy, and it also brought joy to my heart. And when we were music and all of a sudden he would start to sing, other people would smile. And so while on a macro level, it's not that he's doing the kinds of things he used to do anymore, but because I believe that with each of us and we have our purpose and our purpose is continuing to be revealed, I don't have to know what his is, but the more that I nurture him being connected with it and allow him to be in it where it brings him joy, the more peace it brings to me. And it's still there and it's being revealed and I don't have to know what it is.
Great.
Jan, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Sue. Yeah, I wonder what suggestions you might have. My mom is 92 and she's has some degree of dementia. We have 24/7 care for her at home, but she's become very untalkative, you know, where again, I can talk and I try, you know, I do the Jan show. I kind of, you know, bring all my stories and, you know, pictures and this and that. And I'll get some positive responses, but it's very hard to get a response back from her. So, you know, and she was always a, you know, very brilliant, talkative person. So then you know, sometimes, you know, I'll hold her hand if there's nothing, you know, if I can't get any response really, or I'll watch how much, or I'll touch her knee now with, you know, COVID. But any other suggestions when you're just not, you know, you're exhausting your creativity and not necessarily getting much of a response of, you know, I guess just, again, being with that, or any other suggestions there?
The first thing I'm going to say, don't take offense at it, okay? Quit trying. Just be. For example, the woman I was mentioning, Eleanor, who didn't have access to communication anymore, and she didn't have very many ways that she could respond. But we would still read to her. We could tell that she knew what was going on. She didn't have access, or she had chosen not to communicate anymore. And it didn't mean that she wasn't there, and it didn't mean that we didn't need to do that anymore, or that it wouldn't make a difference to her, that she enjoyed it. It's more that we could sense that she enjoyed it. And every once in a while, when we would do something very silly, she could laugh. She didn't have access to words, but she could laugh. And so what I've learned for me in my life and my experience, and I learned this a lot with my dad as he neared the end, is it's just being present with them and they can sense it, and just being you and not expecting anything and not asking for anything and not wanting anything from them, but just allowing them to be.
Great. Thanks. Great.
Joyce?
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? Did that help at all?
Yeah. 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 I mean,
Let me just finish this one thought, you guys. But if it brings joy to your heart, it brings joy to her heart. She may not express it in the way that you would prefer she did,
right.
but it still brings joy to her heart.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And clearly, like I said, some days it's apparent and other days it's not apparent. And yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
If you're dealing with the situations that you've just been talking about recently, and there are adult children involved, and they have differing opinions that you do, how do you not alienate your children and do what you think and feel is right and what you think your spouse would also want?
That's a multitude of questions, Joyce, so I'll break it down a little bit. Early in, I'll explain to you what we did with my daddy and what we did with my husband. Early in their diagnosis, and what we did is we took care of anything that was legal. We dealt with anything that had anything to do with property or legal or anything like that. We talked to an elder care attorney. We took care of all the legal pieces of that, based on what was important for us to do, based on being able to have logical conversations and rational conversations. One of the most challenging, unfortunately, parts when there's a family dynamic in place, and it's often with siblings, is that they still see their parent in a way that they used to be, and they want it to be a certain way. Or they don't want money being spent because it's going to be less money they're going to be getting later. There are different kinds of dynamics that come in there to challenge it. And the third dynamic is, and this is just such a sad dynamic, is that the parents don't want the children to know. They don't want anybody to know. They don't want to burden anybody, and they don't want anybody to think there's anything wrong. So the question you have has a variety of different answers based on those different dynamics. But the way that I focused on it for Jack and over the course of his life, the number one priority is to do everything to protect him being able to be safe and healthy and happy. My two goals for him his entire time, safe and happy. Everything that I've done for him, safe and happy. And so what that meant in the conversations I had with his children, that's how I framed the conversations. This is what we need to do financially to make sure that we protect the assets so that if he lives 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, we're going to be able to keep him safe and do everything we can to keep him happy. And what that might mean is there's no inheritance for you. I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to have the conversation that clears the air now, that we're not going to be talking about holding back care for him in order to protect assets down the line for you. So we just got it right out in the open. They were great with it. There are some families, they're not that. Probably the most challenging part of the equation is when the parents themselves, or especially the person who's been diagnosed, doesn't want anyone to know. What I will implore you with, if any of you know anyone where someone has the disease and they don't want the caregiver to tell anybody, that is going to be so brutally hard on the caregiver because they're trying to protect their loved one, the care receiver. They're trying to be the buffer to the family and everybody else. They're exhausting themselves. Their journey is exhausting enough and they're exhausting themselves. We've had interventions, multiple interventions to try to help with that, because that's just, it's a very devastating part of what the disease is. So I'm not giving you an absolute answer. What I'm saying though is there are variables, and what's important to focus on is where your highest priorities are and how to have the conversations. And there have been a couple of times where we've ended up supporting one of the parents having a conversation with their children who were fighting amongst themselves over what the care for their loved one was going to be. And they just said, stop, no more. And it's tough. Family dynamics are very, very tough.
Yeah, but safe and happy is very important, and thank you.
Safe and happy has been really easy for me. I got to tell you, they sound simple, but when you look at legal agreements, finances, and everything, I mean, that's what I told the attorneys and everybody. Safe and happy. And that's what I told them when we moved them into memory care. Safe and happy. And it does, it just clarifies everything. It clarifies every conversation, and as simple as it sounds, for me, it's worked for all these years.
Fabulous.
All right, the time has come where we have certainly enjoyed Sue's conversation with us.
Bravo.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Bravo, a beautiful butterfly that just unfolded here with wisdom, purpose, and clarity. And we thank you for being our group leader today.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And again, you've got my contact information. I don't have all the answers, but I will certainly listen, and I'll do anything I can to help.